They thought humiliating her would break her. They were wrong. When Serena Moretti's husband let his mistress destroy her in front of New York's elite, everyone expected tears. Instead, they got silence, the dangerous kind. Because the woman they underestimated wasn't just a mob wife. She was the architect of everything her husband claimed to build. And the moment she walked away from that gala, she didn't just leave a marriage. She demolished an empire. This is the story of a woman who proved that the real power never sat on the throne. It stood quietly behind it, holding everything together. If you want to see how far revenge can go when genius meets rage, stay until the end. And hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far Serena's story travels. The Bentley's door opened onto Fifth Avenue, and Serena Moretti stepped out into November cold that bit through silk like teeth through skin. She didn't shiver. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness, even to weather, was a luxury she couldn't afford. The Metropolitan Museum's facade blazed with lights for the annual Children's Healthcare Gala. $1,200 a plate, black tie required, attendance mandatory for anyone who wanted to matter in New York. Serena had organized this event for the past 6 years. She knew every detail, from the orchid arrangements shipped from Singapore to the senator's shellfish allergy, to the exact placement of photographers that would catch the best angles without making guests feel hunted. Mrs. Moretti? The valet's smile was practiced, professional. Beautiful evening. Thank you, Marcus. She'd made it a point to learn his name 3 years ago, along with everyone else who worked these events. Not because she was kind, though she could be, but because information lived in unexpected places, and loyalty grew in soil most people never thought to water. Her husband hadn't arrived yet. Damien always made entrances, never arrivals. He'd show up 40 minutes late with his inner circle, let the room see him, let them remember who owned half the construction contracts in the city and most of the unions besides. Let them remember who you called when you needed something done that couldn't be done legally. Serena smoothed her dress. Valentino, deep emerald, cut to suggest rather than display. She'd learned that too. In Damien's world, wives were supposed to be beautiful enough to prove their husband's worth, but conservative enough not to threaten it. A careful balance, like everything else. Inside, the atrium had been transformed. Ice sculptures caught light like frozen fire. A string quartet played something classical that Serena recognized but couldn't name. She'd approved the playlist but hadn't bothered memorizing it. Waiters moved through the crowd with champagne and canapes, their movements choreographed to avoid collision, to appear effortless. Nothing was effortless. Serena knew that better than anyone. Serena. Caroline Westbrook materialized from the crowd, all teeth and diamonds. Darling, you've outdone yourself. The decorations are absolutely stunning. Thank you, Caroline. Serena accepted the air kiss, returned it with equal emptiness. How's Robert? Oh, busy with the campaign. He's hoping to connect with Damien tonight, some labor issue in Queens. Of course he was. They always wanted something from Damien. A word in the right ear, a problem solved, a competitor discouraged. And Damien would smile and pretend to consider it, and make them wait just long enough to feel grateful when he finally agreed. What none of them knew, what Robert Westbrook and the rest of them would never know, was that Damien didn't decide anything. He barely understood half of what he controlled: the shell companies in the Caymans, the property trusts in Delaware, the network of legitimate businesses that wash dirty money clean. Serena had built all of it, every structure, every safeguard, every path that let them operate in daylight while doing business in shadow. Damien thought he was smart because people treated him like he was. He didn't understand that they treated him that way because Serena had made it impossible not to. Serena Moretti, as I live and breathe. She turned. Victor Chen, federal prosecutor, ambitious and dangerous in equal measure. They'd met at a dozen events like this one, danced around each other with the careful politeness of natural enemies. Victor, still trying to save the world? One indictment at a time. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You look lovely. Damien's a lucky man. He certainly thinks so. Victor laughed. I heard you personally handled the negotiations with the mayor's office for tonight's venue permits. Impressive work. This was fishing. Victor didn't make small talk without purpose. I organize charity events, Victor, not exactly courtroom drama. No, of course not. He sipped his champagne, watching her over the rim. Though I've always wondered how someone with your obvious intelligence ends up planning parties instead of running companies. The comment was designed to flatter and probe simultaneously. Serena had dealt with sharper tactics from harder men. I find meaning in service, she said simply. Not everything worth doing comes with a title. Wise words. He inclined his head. Enjoy your evening, Serena. She watched him disappear into the crowd. Victor Chen was circling something. She could feel it. The question was what, and how close he'd gotten. She'd have to check the accounts again, make sure nothing had been flagged, no transfers questioned. Her systems were clean, had always been clean, but prosecutors built careers on finding cracks that didn't exist until they invented them. Another reason to be careful, another detail to manage. The crowd thickened as more guests arrived. Serena moved through them with practiced grace, greeting, complimenting, remembering. The Hendersons had just bought a place in the Hamptons. The Parkers were divorcing but pretending they weren't. The Thomases had a daughter at Yale who'd been arrested for cocaine possession. Charges dropped, naturally, after a phone call from her father's attorney. Everyone had secrets. Everyone had vulnerabilities. Serena collected both like some women collected shoes. She was talking to the museum director about next year's gala when she felt it. That subtle shift in atmosphere that meant Damien had arrived. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. The room recalibrated around a new center of gravity. Her husband stood at the entrance exactly 43 minutes late, surrounded by his usual entourage. Marco and Tony flanking him like bookends. Vincent half a step behind, already scanning for threats that would never come at an event like this. And beside Damien, wearing a dress that cost more than most people earned in a month, stood Bianca Vale. Serena's face didn't change. Not a muscle, not a flicker. She'd learned that control too. Learned it young. Learned it the hard way. Bianca Vale, 28 years old, former hostess at one of Damien's clubs, recent upgrade to consultant for his real estate holdings. Beautiful in an obvious way. Long dark hair, curves displayed rather than suggested. Smile that promised everything and delivered nothing. Serena had known about her for 7 months. She knew where they met. A suite at the plaza, Tuesdays and Thursdays, always between 2 and 4. She knew what Damien paid her, $4,500 a month, plus expenses, plus the apartment in Tribeca. She knew Bianca's credit card statements, her medical records, her arrest record from Vegas 5 years ago, dismissed after she agreed to cooperate with a much larger investigation. Information was power. Serena had learned that before she'd learned to drive. What she hadn't expected, what genuinely surprised her, was seeing Bianca here, at this event. On Damien's arm, public and proud, like she belonged. "Excuse me," Serena said to the museum director. "I need to greet my husband." But she moved through the crowd. People parted for her, then closed behind her like water. She could feel their eyes, their curiosity. This was New York society. They could smell blood before it was spilled. Damien saw her coming. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, defensive, like he expected an argument but was prepared to win it. "Serena," he kissed her cheek, quick and cold. "You remember Bianca?" "Of course." Serena extended her hand. "How nice to see you again." Bianca's handshake was limp, dismissive. Her smile was worse, sharp and satisfied, like a cat with canary feathers still in its teeth. "Serena." Bianca's voice had that slight rasp some men found sexy and most women recognized as practiced. "What a beautiful event. You must have worked so hard." Translation: "You plan parties while I fuck your husband. Know your place." "Thank you." Serena's smile never wavered. "I hope you enjoy the evening." She turned to Damien, kept her voice low. "I need to speak with you, privately." "I'm busy, Serena. Networking." He gestured to the crowd like it explained everything. "It's important." "Later." Not a suggestion, a dismissal. Marco shifted closer, inserting himself into the conversation. "Mrs. Moretti, maybe we should let the boss. I wasn't speaking to you, Marco." Her voice could have cut glass. For a moment, something flickered in Damien's eyes. Irritation, maybe, or recognition of a line being approached. Then Bianca laughed. Soft, intimate, possessive. She touched Damien's arm, let her fingers linger. Don't worry, darling. I'm sure it can wait. Serena understands you have important people to see. The words hung in the air like smoke. Around them, conversations had quieted. People were watching now, really watching, sensing drama, the way sharks sense blood. Serena looked at Bianca, really looked at her, saw the triumph in her eyes, the certainty. This girl thought she'd won, thought she'd claimed something that mattered. She had no idea what she'd actually done. You're right, Serena said quietly. It can wait. She turned and walked away. Not hurried, not upset, just done with a conversation that no longer served any purpose. Behind her, she heard Bianca's voice, louder now, meant to carry, "Some women just don't know when to step aside and make room for someone who actually belongs." Several people gasped. Someone dropped a champagne flute. It shattered against marble with a sound like breaking bones. Serena kept walking. She found the museum's east terrace, stepped out into cold air that felt clean after the perfumed thickness inside. The city sprawled below her, all light and shadow, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. This was the New York she understood, the one that ate the weak and rewarded the ruthless. Her phone buzzed, a text from her attorney, David Croft. Saw the video. You okay? Someone had already posted it. Of course they had. This was the age of instant documentation, where humiliation went viral before the victim even knew they'd been wounded. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened a different app, one that didn't appear in any app store, one that David had helped her set up 3 years ago when she'd first started preparing for a future that didn't include Damien. The app connected to 7 offshore accounts, 4 shell corporations, and a network of legal structures so complex it had taken her 2 years to build. Everything Damien thought he owned actually existed in a web of trusts, holdings, and subsidiaries that Serena controlled. His name was on the paperwork because that's what he needed to feel important. But the actual power, the ability to move money, authorize transfers, dissolve entities that belonged to her. She'd built it that way deliberately, not because she'd planned to use it, because she'd known, eventually, she might have to. Serena pulled up the main control interface. 14 major accounts, combined balance of just over $43 million. That was the legal money, the clean operations. Then there were the other accounts, the ones that held funds from sources that couldn't be disclosed, that moved through channels that couldn't be named. Another 28 million, give or take. Damien thought he was rich. He had no idea how rich he actually was, or how quickly he could become poor. Her finger hovered over the first transfer authorization. One click, and the Cayman account would freeze. The LLC that held the construction company's operating capital would dissolve. The line of credit, guaranteed by properties Damien didn't technically own, would evaporate. Just one click. But not yet. This required precision, not emotion. Strategy, not rage. She closed the app and made a phone call instead. David? It's me. We need to meet tomorrow, early. And I need you to prepare the documents we discussed last year. All of them. She ended the call before he could ask questions. He was good that way, knew when to speak and when to simply comply. Another text came through. This one from an unknown number. You deserve better than this. She almost deleted it. Then she noticed the area code, 212 Manhattan. And the phrasing, not, you deserve better than him, but this. Like the sender understood it wasn't about Damien. It was about the situation, the humiliation, the public dismissal. She saved the number without responding. When Serena went back inside 20 minutes later, the gala was in full swing. Damien held court near the bar, Bianca still attached to his arm like expensive jewelry. They were laughing, performing for an audience that pretended not to stare while staring anyway. Victor Chen caught Serena's eye from across the room, raised his glass slightly, expression thoughtful. He'd seen what happened. He was already calculating how to use it. Caroline Westbrook approached with synthetic sympathy. Serena, sweetie, if you need to leave early, no one would blame you. Why would I leave? Serena accepted a fresh champagne flute from a passing waiter. This is my event. She worked the room for another hour, smiled, laughed, discussed art and politics and the shocking price of real estate, acted like her world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Because that was the thing about power that people like Bianca Vale would never understand. It wasn't about noise. It wasn't about making sure everyone knew who you were or what you'd won. Real power was quiet. It was the ability to smile while planning destruction, to appear weak while being strong, to let people think they'd defeated you right up until the moment they realized they'd destroyed themselves. Around 11, the gala began winding down. Donors departed with goodie bags and tax receipts. The museum director thanked Serena profusely, already talking about next year. She nodded and smiled and said all the right things. Damien finally approached her near midnight. Bianca had disappeared, probably to the ladies' room to reapply lipstick and congratulate herself. "You handled tonight well," he said. "Not an apology, an assessment." "Thank you." Bianca didn't mean anything. She was just saying what you were thinking. Serena met his eyes. "It's fine, Damien. Really." He looked uncertain, like he'd expected tears or rage and didn't know how to process calm. "We should talk," he said finally, "about arrangements." "Arrangements?" "You know," he couldn't quite look at her, "how we move forward. You'd be taken care of, obviously. The house in Connecticut, a reasonable allowance. We could make it clean." There it was. Not even 24 hours of thought. He'd already planned it out, probably with Bianca whispering in his ear about fresh starts and new beginnings, 12 years of marriage, dismissed in a paragraph. "Of course," Serena said softly. "Whatever you think is best." Relief flooded his face. He'd expected resistance. He'd armed himself for a fight, and she'd just surrendered. Now he didn't know what to do with all that prepared aggression. "Good. That's good. David can draw up the papers. We'll keep it quiet. Handle it professionally." "Absolutely." She touched his arm, gentle. "You deserve to be happy, Damien. We both do." He actually smiled, kissed her forehead like she was a child he'd just successfully manipulated. "You're a class act, Serena. Always have been." Then he walked away, back to Bianca, back to his new future. Serena watched him go, felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just a kind of crystalline clarity that came from finally understanding where you stood. She left the gala at midnight. The city was quieter now, the streets less frantic. Her driver held the door and she slid into the Bentley's leather interior. "Home, Mrs. Moretti?" She thought about the house in Connecticut, the one Damien had just promised her. The house she'd picked out 7 years ago, the one she'd decorated and furnished and filled with pieces she loved. The house that existed in a trust she controlled, that Damien couldn't sell or mortgage without her signature. He really didn't understand anything. "Home," she confirmed. On the drive, she opened her laptop, started making lists. Not emotional lists, not revenge fantasies. Practical lists. Legal vulnerabilities. Financial dependencies. Political connections that existed because of her, not him. Business deals that would collapse without her involvement. Secrets that she knew, and he didn't. By the time they reached Connecticut, she had 17 pages of notes. The house was dark except for the lights she'd programmed to turn on automatically. She dismissed the driver, walked inside, locked the door behind her. Then she poured herself 3 fingers of whiskey, Damien's expensive Japanese single malt, the bottle he thought was his, and sat down at her desk. From a locked drawer, she pulled out a file folder. It was thick, organized with colored tabs, every page labeled and dated. She'd started building it 3 years ago, not because she'd wanted to, but because she'd learned to plan for possibilities rather than hope they wouldn't happen. The folder contained everything. Bank account numbers Damien didn't know existed, corporate structures he'd signed without reading, property deeds that named her as the actual owner, with him listed as secondary, partnership agreements with clauses he'd never noticed, emails, text messages, recorded phone calls where he'd discuss things that federal prosecutors would find very interesting. She wasn't vindictive by nature, but she was thorough, and she'd learned long ago that the only person you could really trust to protect you was yourself. Serena opened her laptop again, pulled up the encrypted app, looked at those 14 accounts, all that money, all that power. Then she started clicking. The first account, the one that held operating capital for the construction company. She froze with a password change Damien wouldn't be able to reset without her authorization. The second account she transferred to a different bank entirely, under a different corporate entity. The third account she left alone because it was being watched by federal investigators, and touching it now would raise flags. She worked for 3 hours, methodically, carefully, moving pieces on a board that Damien didn't even know he was playing on. By 3 in the morning, she'd restructured his entire financial life. He wouldn't notice immediately. Tomorrow, maybe the next day, everything would still work. Accounts would still have money, transfers would still process. But the foundations were gone. She'd pulled the support beams out of a building that looked solid but was actually already collapsing. It would take a week, maybe 2, before he understood what was happening. Before the calls started coming in, the deals falling through, the partners backing out. Before he realized that everything he thought he'd built was actually just a house of cards that she'd been holding together. And when he finally figured it out, when he came to her desperate and confused and demanding she fix it, she would look at him the same way she'd looked at Bianca tonight. Calm, clear, done. She closed the laptop, finished her whiskey. Sat in the dark house that was hers, not his, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, exactly, but something close to it. Freedom. Outside, November wind rattled the windows. Inside, Serena Moretti smiled. The empire had started falling. Damien just didn't know it yet. The first crack appeared on Tuesday. Serena was having coffee in the sunroom when her phone rang. David Croft, her attorney, calling before 8 in the morning. Never a good sign. "Tell me," she said. "Damien's been trying to reach me since 6, left 4 voicemails. He sounds—" David paused, searching for the right word. "Concerned." "About?" "The Patterson deal. Apparently the funding didn't come through. The account he was pulling from shows insufficient balance." Serena sipped her coffee. It was still hot, exactly the temperature she preferred. "That's unfortunate." "Serena." David's voice dropped. "Did you—" "I restructured some holdings, moved assets to more secure positions, completely legal, completely within my authority as the actual owner of those entities." Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "How much did you move?" "Enough." "Jesus." A long exhale. "He's going to realize eventually." She watched a cardinal land on the bird feeder outside, bright red against November gray. But not today. Today he'll think it's a banking error. Maybe tomorrow too. By the time he understands what's actually happening, it'll be too late to stop it. "And you're sure about this? Because once it starts, it already started, David. The moment he brought that girl to my event and let her humiliate me in public, it started. I'm just finishing what he began." Another pause. "I'll need to see you. Today. We should review everything, make sure your exposure is minimal." "This afternoon, 2 o'clock." She ended the call and returned to her coffee. The cardinal was still there, pecking at seeds. Simple creature. Found food, ate it, flew away. No strategy required. She envied that sometimes. By noon, 3 more calls had come in. Not to her. She'd turned off notifications for anything related to Damien's business. But she could track them anyway, through the monitoring software she'd installed on his phone 8 months ago. Marco twice, Tony once, Vincent 3 times. All panicked, all trying to figure out why various accounts weren't accessible, why transfers were being rejected, why things that should have worked just didn't. Damien called her at 1:15. "Serena." His voice was tight, controlled. The voice he used when he was angry but trying not to show it. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "No, in person. I'm sending Marco to pick you up. I have an appointment at 2. "Cancel it." There was the real Damien. Not the charming public face, but the man who expected compliance and got angry when he didn't receive it. "I'll be home by 4, she said calmly. "We can talk then." "Serena?" She hung up, blocked his number, sent a text to Marco. "Tell Damien I'll see him this evening. I'm not available before then." Then she drove to David's office in Manhattan. His firm occupied 3 floors of a building in Midtown, all glass and steel and expensive furniture that screamed success without quite shouting it. David met her in his private office, door closed, assistant dismissed. "Show me everything," he said. She did. Pulled out her laptop, walked him through every change she'd made, every account she'd moved, every structure she'd dissolved or reformed. It took 90 minutes. When she finished, David sat back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. "This is brilliant," he said finally, "and completely devastating." That was the goal. He's going to fight back, you know that. With what? Serena turned the laptop so he could see the screen. Every major asset exists in entities I control. His name is on the paperwork, but the actual ownership, the legal ownership, belongs to trusts and LLCs that require my signature to access. He can't sell. He can't mortgage. He can't even transfer funds without my authorization. He'll claim fraud, say you manipulated him, forged documents, except he signed everything, voluntarily. You witnessed most of the signatures yourself. She pulled out another folder, this one filled with notarized documents. And I have emails where he explicitly acknowledged the structures, thanked me for handling the boring legal stuff so he could focus on real business. David flipped through the papers. His expression shifted from concern to something like awe. How long have you been planning this? 3 years, since the first time he hit me. The words hung in the air like smoke. David's eyes widened. He hit you? Once. We'd been married 9 years. He'd had too much to drink, lost money on a bad investment, needed someone to blame. She kept her voice even, factual. He backhanded me across the kitchen, split my lip. Then he cried and apologized and promised it would never happen again. Did it? No, because I made it clear that if it did, I'd destroy him. He didn't understand how, but he believed me. She smiled without humor. Turns out I just needed to wait for him to destroy himself. David was quiet for a long moment. The federal investigation. Victor Chen. How close is he? Close enough to make Damien nervous. Not close enough to actually touch him yet. She pulled up another file on her laptop. But that could change, especially if certain information became available to the right people. You'd cooperate? Testify? If necessary. With full immunity, of course. And protection. She met his eyes. I built the structures, David, but I never touched the dirty money, never participated in the actual crimes. I just made sure everything looked legal from the outside. That's a fine line. It's the only line that matters. He studied her for a long moment. You're different, since the gala. No, I'm just done pretending to be something I'm not. She left his office at 3:30. Traffic was heavy, it always was, so she didn't get back to Connecticut until nearly 6. The house was dark when she arrived, which meant Damien was still in the city, probably still trying to figure out what was happening to his accounts. She made herself dinner. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of white wine. Ate slowly, deliberately, tasting each bite. For 12 years, she'd eaten meals while working, while planning, while managing 100 different crises that Damien created and she had to solve. Tonight, she just ate. It felt like luxury. He arrived at 8, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. She heard his footsteps in the hallway, heavy and angry. When he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face was flushed, his tie loose, his expensive suit wrinkled. What did you do? Not a question, an accusation. Serena finished her wine, set the glass down carefully. You'll have to be more specific. The accounts, the Patterson deal, the fucking construction company can't make payroll because the operating account is frozen. He crossed the room in 3 long steps, loomed over her. What did you do? She looked up at him, didn't flinch. I secured my assets, that's all. Your assets? Those are my companies, my money. Actually, they're not. She stood, moved past him to the sink, rinsed her glass. They're mine. They always have been. You just didn't bother to read the paperwork. His hand shot out, grabbed her arm, spun her around. His grip was tight enough to bruise. Fix it, he said through clenched teeth. Right now. Fix it or what? Her voice was perfectly calm. You'll hit me? Like you did before? He dropped her arm like it had burned him, took a step back. That was years ago. I apologized, and I believed you. But that was before you decided to replace me with a 28-year-old who thinks Chanel is a personality trait. She brushed past him, headed for the living room. You wanted a divorce, Damien. You told me last night, so I'm protecting myself, that's all. By destroying everything I've built? He followed her, voice rising. By freezing accounts, blocking transfers, do you have any idea what you've done? I've got partners calling, deals falling apart. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you publicly humiliated me. She turned to face him. Or did you think I'd just accept it, smile and step aside while you and Bianca played house? This isn't about her. Yes, it is. It's about you thinking I was weak. Thinking I was just the little wife who planned parties and looked pretty and didn't understand how anything really worked. She smiled. Surprise, Damien. I understood everything. I built everything. And now I'm taking it apart. He stared at her like she was a stranger. I don't know you. No, you never did. His phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, he yanked it out, checked the screen, cursed. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. He left without another word. The door didn't slam this time. It closed with careful, controlled quiet that was somehow more ominous. Serena stood in the empty living room and listened to his car pull away. Then she poured herself another glass of wine and returned to her laptop. The calls from Damien's associates continued throughout Wednesday. She tracked them all, watched the panic spread like a virus through his organization. The construction company's payroll was delayed. The real estate deal in Queens collapsed when funding fell through. A loan payment was missed, triggering penalty clauses and angry calls from the bank. Each failure was small by itself, but together they painted a picture of an organization falling apart from the inside. Marco showed up at the house Thursday morning. Serena watched him through the window, pacing on the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing angrily. When he finally rang the doorbell, she made him wait 3 full minutes before answering. Mrs. Moretti. He tried to smile, but it came out wrong, desperate. I need to talk to you about the business. I'm not involved in Damien's business, Marco. You know that. Yeah, but... He glanced over his shoulder like he was worried someone might hear. Look, the accounts. The ones you set up. We can't access them. Have you tried calling the banks? The banks say they need authorization from the account holder. But when we give them Damien's information, they say he's not the primary holder, that the accounts belong to some LLC we've never heard of. How strange. She started to close the door. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Mrs. Moretti, please. He put his hand on the door, stopping it. People are scared. The guys, the crews. They didn't get paid last week. They're asking questions. Then Damien should answer them. He can't, because he doesn't know what happened. Marco's voice dropped. But you do, don't you? She met his eyes, saw the fear there, the understanding that something fundamental had shifted. Tell Damien I'm willing to meet, Saturday, noon, at Russo's. Why not here? Because I prefer public places for business discussions. She smiled. And this is definitely business. Marco left. She watched him drive away, then called David. Saturday meeting. Damien, probably Marco, maybe others. I'll need you there. As your attorney? As my representative. This is a negotiation now. What are you negotiating? Terms of surrender. Saturday arrived cold and bright. Serena dressed carefully. Armani suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. She looked like what she was, a woman who meant business. Russo's was a restaurant in Little Italy, old-school Italian place that Damien's father had favored. It had private rooms in the back for meetings that required discretion. Serena had booked one of them. She arrived 15 minutes early. David was already there, briefcase open, documents organized. Ready? He asked. Always. Damien came in at 12 exactly. He'd brought Marco and Tony, both of whom looked uncomfortable in suits they didn't wear often enough. No Bianca. Interesting. Serena. Damien's voice was carefully neutral. David. They sat across from each other at a table built for 8, 4 on one side, 2 on the other. The imbalance was deliberate. Let's not waste time, Damien said. I know you're angry. You have a right to be. What happened at the gala was inappropriate. Bianca overstepped. This isn't about Bianca. Then what's it about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to punish me by destroying everything we built together. We didn't build it together, Damien. I built it. You just took credit. His jaw tightened. That's bullshit. Is it? She nodded to David, who slid a folder across the table. Those are the corporate documents for every major asset you claim to own. Take a look. Show me where your name appears as anything other than a signatory. Damien opened the folder, flipped through pages. His face went from angry to confused to pale. This can't be right. It's completely right. Every company, every account, every property exists in a trust or LLC that I control. You have signature authority on some of them, but not ownership. I'm the owner. You forged these. His voice was shaking now. You manipulated. No, you signed them, willingly, usually without reading them, because you trusted me to handle the boring legal stuff. She pulled out another folder. Here are the emails where you explicitly acknowledge that I'm handling corporate structures. Here are text messages where you thank me for making things simple for you. Here's a recorded phone conversation where you tell your lawyer that I have full authority to organize business entities however I think best. Damien looked at Marco, then Tony, like they might have answers. They didn't. What do you want? Damien finally asked. His voice was different now, smaller. A clean divorce. No contest, no drama. You keep your personal assets, the cars, the clothes, whatever's actually in your name. I keep everything else. That's insane. You'd leave me with nothing. Not nothing, you'll have Bianca. Serena smiled. I'm sure she'll be very supportive when you explain that the penthouse and the boats and the lifestyle she was expecting don't actually exist anymore. You vindictive bitch. The words came out flat, exhausted. No, just practical. She stood. You have until Monday to decide. Sign the divorce papers, walk away clean, and I'll make sure you have enough to live comfortably. Fight me. And I'll make sure the federal prosecutors get every piece of information they need to put you away for 20 years. You'd testify against me? In a heartbeat. David stood too, gathered his documents. The papers will be ready Monday morning. I suggest you have your attorney review them carefully. They left Damien sitting at the table, flanked by his men, staring at documents that proved everything he thought he owned was actually hers. In the car, David let out a long breath. That was brutal. That was necessary. He's not going to just accept this. He'll fight. Let him. Serena watched the city scroll past her window. He's fighting a battle he already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. But Damien did fight. Over the next week, he hired 3 different attorneys, all of whom reviewed the documents and told him the same thing. Legally, Serena was in the right. The companies were hers, the accounts were hers, he had no claim. He tried different tactics, called her crying, begging her to reconsider, called her screaming, threatening to expose her, sent Marco to intimidate her, which failed when she threatened to call the police and press charges. Nothing worked. By the second week, the consequences were cascading. The construction company went into default on a major contract. The real estate holdings couldn't secure financing. Partners started distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with an operation that was clearly imploding. And through it all, Serena watched and waited and made careful adjustments to ensure maximum damage with minimum exposure. She met with Victor Chen for coffee on a Tuesday afternoon. Neutral location, public place, nothing that could be misconstrued. I wondered when you'd reach out, Victor said. I'm not reaching out, I'm just having coffee. Of course, he smiled. Though if you were reaching out, hypothetically, what would you be reaching out about? Hypothetically, I'd be reaching out to ask about immunity agreements, what they cover, what they require. Hypothetically, immunity agreements require full cooperation, complete disclosure of any criminal activity you're aware of, testimony if needed, and a commitment to answer all questions truthfully. And in exchange, no prosecution for crimes you may have facilitated but didn't directly commit, protection from retaliation, a chance to start over. Serena sipped her coffee. That sounds reasonable, hypothetically. The thing about immunity agreements, Victor continued, is that they only work if the information provided is actually valuable, if it leads to prosecutions, convictions, real justice. I understand. Do you? He leaned forward slightly. Because I've been building a case against your husband for 3 years, Serena. 3 years of surveillance, wiretaps, financial analysis. And I've gotten close, but never quite close enough. He's smart. Or someone's been smart for him. Maybe both. Maybe. He studied her. If someone were to provide documentation, real documentation, not just testimony, showing how money was moved, how legitimate businesses were used to launder criminal proceeds, how specific individuals were involved in specific crimes, that would be valuable. How valuable? Full immunity, new identity if needed, protection, everything. She finished her coffee. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. I'm not the only one circling this. The FBI has a task force. The state has investigators. Someone's going to break this open soon. You want to be the one who cooperates, not the one who gets caught cooperating too late. She left the coffee shop and drove home, spent the evening reviewing files, organizing evidence, preparing for possibilities. Her phone rang at 10. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Mrs. Moretti? This is Rachel Chen. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. I'm working on a story about organized crime in the construction industry, and your husband's name has come up. I was hoping we could talk. No comment. I understand this is difficult, but I have sources saying that you're the one who actually ran the business side of your husband's operations, that you built the corporate structures that allowed... Serena hung up, blocked the number. But the call had confirmed something important. The walls were closing in. The federal prosecutors, the reporters, all of them were circling now, sensing blood in the water. She needed to move faster. She called David. The immunity agreement. I want it. Set up a meeting with Victor Chen. When? Tomorrow. Serena, are you sure? Once you do this, I'm sure. Set it up. The meeting happened Thursday in a conference room at the federal building. Victor was there with 2 other prosecutors and an FBI agent. David sat beside Serena, briefcase open, ready. Tell me what you have, Victor said. She did. Spent 3 hours walking them through everything. The shell companies in the Caymans, the property trusts used to hide assets, the specific deals where dirty money had been washed clean, names, dates, amounts, methods. When she finished, Victor looked at his colleagues. They looked back. Some silent communication passed between them. This is good, Victor said finally. This is really good. Good enough for full immunity? Good enough for immunity and protection both. He slid a document across the table. Sign this, and you're covered. But you'll need to testify. Grand jury first, trial later if it goes that far. And Damien? Will be arrested within the week, along with several others. Serena picked up the pen, hesitated. Once I sign this, there's no going back. No, Victor agreed. There's not. She signed. That night she packed a bag. Not everything. She'd arrange for the rest later. Just essentials. Clothes, documents, laptop, jewelry. She was loading the last bag into her car when headlights swept across the driveway. Damien's Mercedes. He got out slowly, looking exhausted. Going somewhere? Yes. He walked toward her. She tensed, hand sliding into her pocket where she'd placed a small canister of pepper spray. But he just stood there, looking at her like he'd never seen her before. You really did it, he said quietly. You really destroyed everything. You destroyed it, Damien. The moment you chose her over me, over us, I just finished what you started. I loved you. No, you loved what I did for you. There's a difference. He looked like he wanted to argue, to fight, but he was too tired. Or maybe he just finally understood there was nothing left to fight about. Where will you go? Somewhere you'll never find me. She got in her car, started the engine. As she pulled away, she looked in the rearview mirror. Damien stood in the driveway, getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. She drove into the city, checked into a hotel under a name that wasn't hers, and waited for everything she'd set in motion to finally come crashing down. It wouldn't be long now. The arrest happened on a Friday morning, 3 days after Serena signed the immunity agreement. She watched it on the news from her hotel room, coffee going cold in her hand as CNN showed footage of federal agents leading Damien out of their Connecticut house in handcuffs. He looked smaller on television, older. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was just a man who'd gotten caught doing things he should have stopped doing years ago. The news anchor's voice was professionally neutral. Damien Moretti, prominent New York construction executive, was arrested this morning on charges including racketeering, money laundering, and wire fraud. Federal prosecutors say Moretti used a network of shell companies and fraudulent contracts to launder millions of dollars over the past decade. Marco and Tony were arrested the same day. Vincent disappeared. Word was he'd seen it coming and run. Smart man. The news didn't mention Serena at all, which meant Victor had kept his word about keeping her involvement quiet until the grand jury. Her phone buzzed. Text from David. You okay? She typed back, yes. She wasn't. Not really. Watching your husband get arrested was strange even when you were the one who'd caused it. Even when he deserved it. Even when you'd stopped loving him years ago. But she was functional. That was close enough. The media coverage exploded over the weekend. Every network picked up the story. The Times ran a front-page piece, Rachel Chen's byline, detailing the construction corruption. The Post went tabloid with it. Mob boss busted. Social media filled with speculation, conspiracy theories, hot takes from people who'd never met Damien but had plenty of opinions about him. And through it all, questions about the wife. Where was she? What did she know? Was she complicit or victim? Serena stayed in her hotel room and waited for the storm to pass over her. Monday morning, Victor called. Grand jury is scheduled for Wednesday. You ready? Yes. It won't be easy. They're going to ask detailed questions, want specific answers. You'll need to be precise. I understand. And Serena? He paused. Once you testify, it's public record. Your name will be out there. People will know you cooperated. I'm aware. Just making sure. Another pause. For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. She wasn't sure about that. The right thing would have been never marrying Damien in the first place. Never building the structures that let him operate for so long. Never being smart enough to make it all work so smoothly that it took federal prosecutors 3 years to unravel what she'd constructed in 18 months. But it was too late for right things. This was damage control. The grand jury testimony lasted 6 hours. Serena sat in a windowless room and answered questions from prosecutors who already knew most of the answers but needed her to say them out loud for the record. She explained the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the property trusts. She named names, provided dates, described conversations she'd witnessed or participated in. She didn't cry, didn't ask for breaks, just answered each question clearly and moved on to the next one. When it was over, Victor walked her to a side exit where David was waiting. That was good testimony, Victor said. Clear, detailed, credible. The jury will indict. How long until trial? 6 months, maybe 8. These things take time. He handed her a card. This is your contact at the Marshal's service. If you feel threatened at any point, call them immediately. Threatened by who? Damien's in jail. His associates aren't, and not everyone is going to be happy about your cooperation. She took the card, added it to the collection of business cards that were slowly rebuilding her life into something new. David drove her back to the hotel. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? She'd testified against her husband. She'd helped put him in prison. She'd done what needed to be done, but that didn't make it feel good. You should leave the city, David said when they reached the hotel. Go somewhere quiet for a while. Let things settle. Where would I go? I don't know. Somewhere you can think. Figure out what comes next. She almost laughed. What came next? She was 38 years old, newly single, with no job and a reputation that was about to become very complicated. What came next was whatever she could build from the wreckage. But David was right. She needed space, distance, time to breathe without waiting for the next crisis. She rented a house in the Berkshires, small place, isolated. Nothing like the Connecticut mansion. It had a fireplace and large windows that looked out on trees that were already bare for winter. She brought her laptop, some clothes, and not much else. The first few days were strange. She'd spent 12 years managing constant chaos, putting out fires, solving problems that appeared faster than she could address them. Now there was just silence. No phone calls from Damien's associates. No emergencies requiring immediate attention. No one needing her to fix anything. She didn't know what to do with silence, so she worked. Opened her laptop and started planning. Not revenge anymore. That was done. But survival, transformation, whatever came after destroying the life she'd built. She still controlled the legitimate businesses, the real estate holdings, the investment accounts, the properties that had never been touched by criminal money. That was roughly $18 million in clean assets. Not enough to be truly wealthy by New York standards, but enough to rebuild. The question was, rebuild into what? She was researching business opportunities when her phone rang. Unknown number. She'd been ignoring those, but something made her answer this one. Hello? Serena Moretti? A woman's voice, professional but warm. My name is Lauren Hastings. I'm a managing partner at Hastings Strategic Group. I was hoping we could talk. About what? About your future. And ours, potentially. They met at a restaurant in Boston 3 days later. Lauren Hastings was in her 50s, gray hair cut sharp, eyes that missed nothing. She'd built one of the most successful consulting firms on the East Coast by helping wealthy families manage their assets and navigate complex legal situations. I'll be direct, Lauren said after they had ordered. I've been following your situation. The arrest, the testimony, all of it. And I'm impressed. Impressed by what? My husband getting arrested? Impressed by the fact that you built a structure so sophisticated that it took federal prosecutors years to understand it. Impressed that you had the foresight to protect yourself. Impressed that you knew when to cooperate and how to negotiate favorable terms. Lauren leaned forward. You're smart, Serena. Smarter than most people I've met. And I think you're wasting that intelligence. Wasting it how? By not using it. You spent 12 years making someone else successful, building someone else's empire. Now you have a chance to build your own. Doing what? Consulting. Specifically, helping high net worth families structure their assets to minimize legal exposure and maximize protection. It's what you already know how to do. You'd just be doing it legally this time. Serena sipped her water. You want to hire someone who just testified against her husband in a federal case? That's not exactly good publicity. It's perfect publicity. It shows you understand consequences. It shows you know how to protect yourself when things go wrong. My clients aren't interested in morality plays, Serena. They're interested in competence, and you're extremely competent. I'd need credentials. A law degree, maybe an MBA. You have something better. You have experience. Real-world, high-stakes experience that you can't get from a classroom. Lauren slid a folder across the table. This is an offer. Partnership track. Starting salary of $400,000, performance bonuses, full benefits. You'd work with me directly for the first year, learn our systems, build your client base. After that, we'd reevaluate based on your results. Serena opened the folder. The offer letter was real, detailed, exactly what Lauren had described. Why are you doing this? Because I see potential. And because I like betting on smart women who've been underestimated. Lauren smiled. Think about it. But don't think too long. I have other candidates. Serena took the folder back to the Berkshires, read it 3 times, researched the company, looked at their client list, checked Lauren's background. Everything was legitimate, prestigious, even. She called David. It's a good offer, he said after she'd explained it. Great offer, actually, but are you ready to jump back into high-stakes work? You just escaped one complicated situation. This is different. This is legal. Is it? Because the line between legal asset protection and helping people hide money can be pretty thin. I know where the line is, David. I've spent 12 years walking it. Exactly my point. She thought about that after they hung up. Thought about lines and where they were drawn and who decided which side you were on. Thought about the difference between building structures to hide crimes and building structures to protect assets. The mechanics were similar. The intent was different. Maybe that was enough. She called Lauren the next morning. I'll take it. When do I start? Monday. I'll have an office ready for you in Boston. Back in the city, the indictments kept coming. The grand jury had been busy. By the end of November, 15 people had been charged in connection with Damien's operation. The construction company was dissolved. The real estate holdings were seized. Everything Damien had touched was being torn apart by investigators looking for evidence. Serena's name appeared in the court documents, not as a defendant. Her immunity agreement protected her from that, but as a cooperating witness. Federal witness S.M., who had provided substantial assistance to the investigation. It didn't take long for people to figure out who that was. The media requests started immediately. CNN, MSN, BC, The Times, The Post. Everyone wanted an interview with the mob wife who'd turned on her husband. She declined them all. Issued a statement through David saying she was cooperating with authorities and had no further comment. But the story grew anyway. Think pieces about women in organized crime, profiles of famous mob wives, speculation about her role, her knowledge, her culpability. Some painted her as a victim who'd finally found the courage to escape. Others portrayed her as an accomplice who'd only cooperated to save herself. Both versions were partially true and completely inadequate. Caroline Westbrook called. Serena almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Serena, darling, I just wanted to check on you. This must be so difficult." Translation: I want gossip. "I'm managing, Caroline. Thank you for calling." "Of course. You know, if you need anything, any support at all, I appreciate that. I have to say I'm just shocked by all this. Damien always seemed so legitimate." "Because I made him seem that way," Serena thought. "Because I built the facade you all believed in." "People can be surprising," she said instead. "And that awful Bianca girl. Have you heard? She's been giving interviews claiming she had no idea about any of this, that she was as shocked as anyone." Serena had seen one of the interviews. Bianca on Good Morning America, playing the innocent girlfriend who'd been fooled by a charming criminal. Wearing a conservative dress, minimal makeup, affecting an expression of wounded betrayal. "I'm sure she's handling it her own way," Serena said. "Well, I think it's disgusting, using this tragedy to get attention." Caroline paused. "Not that I'm comparing your situations. Obviously you were married to him. She was just, well, you know." "Yes, I know." After Caroline hung up, Serena poured herself wine and sat by the fireplace. Thought about Bianca, who'd wanted the throne and gotten nothing but scandal. Thought about all the people who'd orbited Damien's world, drawn to the power and money, never understanding where it came from or what it cost. She didn't feel sorry for them, but she didn't feel triumphant either, just tired. Her first day at Hastings Strategic Group was deliberately low-key. Lauren showed her to an office, introduced her to key staff members, gave her access to their systems and databases. No one mentioned her background directly, but she could feel their curiosity. The woman who'd married a criminal, the woman who'd testified, the woman who'd survived. "Your first client meeting is tomorrow," Lauren said. "The Hendricks family. Old money, complicated trust structures, concerned about exposure from a business deal that might have legal complications." "What kind of complications?" "The kind that require discretion and expertise, which is why they're coming to us." Lauren smiled. "Relax, Serena. You know how to do this. Just do it legally this time." The meeting went well. The Hendricks were exactly what Lauren had described: wealthy, worried, willing to pay premium rates for someone who understood how to protect assets from legal scrutiny. Serena listened to their concerns, analyzed their structures, and provided recommendations that were completely legal but extremely effective. By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed to retain the firm. Her first client, her first success in a legitimate business. It felt strange. Good, but strange. Damien's trial date was set for March. David called with the news, warned her that she'd need to testify again, this time in open court where Damien would be present. "Are you prepared for that?" "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice, Serena. You could refuse to testify, take the consequences." "Which would be what? Prison? Having my immunity revoked?" She shook her head even though he couldn't see it. "No, I made a deal. I'll honor it." December brought early snow and more complications. Someone leaked her hotel address to the press. She had to move, found a furnished apartment in Cambridge under a corporate lease that didn't list her name. Added another layer of separation between who she was and where she lived. She was learning to be invisible again. Different kind of invisible than before. Not the invisible wife standing behind a powerful husband, but the invisible woman building something new without drawing attention to the construction. Marco reached out through a lawyer, wanted to meet, to talk. His attorney made it sound urgent, important. Serena agreed because she was curious what he wanted, and because the meeting would be in a lawyer's office with witnesses present. Marco looked bad, thinner, older, like the stress had aged him 5 years and 2 months. He sat across from her with his attorney beside him and tried to smile. "Thanks for coming," he said. "What do you want, Marco?" "I want to understand why you did it, why you burned everything down. You were there at the gala. You saw what happened." "Yeah, but that was just Bianca being stupid. She didn't mean anything by it." "She meant exactly what she said, and Damien let her say it." Serena kept her voice level. "For 12 years, I built everything he had, every company, every account, every protection that kept him operating, and he threw me away for a girl who didn't even know what she was inheriting. So you destroyed it all? Put good people out of work? Got guys arrested who were just trying to feed their families? Those guys knew what they were signing up for, Marco. Don't pretend they were innocent. They trusted you. We all did. His voice cracked. You were supposed to be loyal. I was loyal for 12 years. But loyalty runs both ways, and Damien forgot that. Marco's attorney cleared his throat. My client wanted you to know that he's cooperating with prosecutors. He's providing information about the operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Serena looked at Marco. Good for you. I hope it helps. I'm telling them about the accounts, the offshore stuff, everything you set up, which is information I already gave them, so you're not providing anything new, just confirming what they already know. She stood. Is that all? I thought you should know that people are talking, that your name is coming up. Let it come up. I have immunity. You don't. She left Marco sitting there with his lawyer and his regrets. Felt nothing. He'd made choices, same as everyone else. Now he'd live with them. By mid-December, the full scope of the investigation was public. The federal indictment ran 147 pages, detailed dozens of schemes and frauds, implicated over 20 people. Damien's organization, which had seemed so powerful and untouchable, was revealed as a clumsy criminal operation that had only survived as long as it did, because Serena had been smart enough to hide its worst elements. The construction workers who'd lost jobs blamed Damien. The investors who'd lost money blamed Damien. Even some of his own associates, the ones who'd avoided indictment, blamed Damien for being stupid enough to get caught. No one blamed Serena. Or if they did it quietly. Bianca gave another interview, this one to Vanity Fair. The piece was titled, "The Woman Who Loved a Mobster." It painted her as naive and manipulated, a victim of Damien's charm and lies. The article mentioned Serena exactly once, his estranged wife who declined to comment. Serena read it in her Cambridge apartment and laughed. Bianca had wanted attention, wanted recognition, wanted to matter, and she'd gotten it, just not the way she'd imagined. Not as a mob boss's queen, but as his foolish mistress who'd destroyed her own life chasing someone else's throne. Christmas came and went. Serena spent it alone in her apartment, working on client files, building her new career one case at a time. Lauren called to check on her, invited her to a firm holiday party. Serena declined. She wasn't ready for office parties, for small talk and forced cheer. She was still figuring out how to be a person who wasn't defined by someone else's crimes. On New Year's Eve, David called. Damien wants to talk to you. No. He's asking for a meeting, says it's important. Everything is always important to Damien. The answer is still no. Serena, he's facing 20 years, maybe more. He's scared. Good. He should be. Will you at least think about it? She hung up without answering, poured herself champagne and watched the city lights from her apartment window. Somewhere out there, people were celebrating, kissing at midnight, making resolutions, pretending the turn of a calendar page meant something more than arbitrary time measurement. She drank alone and thought about the year that had passed, the gala, the confrontation, the systematic destruction of everything she'd built, the testimony, the rebirth. It had been the worst year of her life, and somehow, also the most honest. Her phone buzzed at 11:45, text from an unknown number, Happy New Year, you earned it. She stared at the message. Didn't recognize the number. Could have been David or Lauren or someone from the firm. Could have been someone else entirely. She typed back, Who is this? No response. At midnight, fireworks exploded over the city. Serena watched them alone, champagne glass in hand, and made no resolutions. She'd learned that promises to yourself were just another kind of lie. What mattered was what you did, not what you planned to do. And what she was doing was building, slowly, carefully, legally, a life that belonged to her, a career that used her skills without compromising her freedom, an existence that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or participation. It wasn't the life she'd imagined at 26 when she'd married Damien and thought love was enough to build a future on. But it was real, solid, hers, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. January brought cold that felt personal, like the city itself was trying to drive everyone indoors. Serena walked to work anyway, preferring frozen air to the subway's recycled breath and pressed bodies. The walk gave her time to think, to prepare for whatever the day would bring. Her caseload had grown. 3 families now, all with complicated financial situations that required the kind of careful restructuring she'd once done in shadow. Doing it legally was harder in some ways, more restrictions, more oversight, more people who needed to approve each step. But it was also cleaner. She slept better knowing federal prosecutors weren't building cases around her work. Lauren caught her in the hallway after a client meeting. "Good work with the Hendricks. They've referred 2 more families to us. Both requested you specifically." Word travels fast. "In our world it does." Lauren paused. "There's something else. A potential client. High profile, complicated situation. They specifically asked for you." "Who?" "Andrea Castellano." Serena kept her face neutral, but her mind was already racing. Andrea Castellano ran one of the oldest Italian families in New York. Not crime, or at least not anymore. They'd gone legitimate 2 generations ago, turned mob money into real estate and restaurants and investment portfolios. But the transition had been messy, and there were still questions about where certain assets had come from. "What does she want?" "To talk, that's all I know. She'll be here tomorrow at 10. Serena spent the evening researching. The Castellano family had been powerful when Damien was still learning to walk. They'd controlled unions, construction, waste management, the same territories Damien had later tried to claim. The difference was, they'd been smart enough to get out before the federal government made organized crime its personal crusade. Andrea had inherited the family business at 32 when her father died. She'd systematically dismantled the criminal operations, paid off the right people, made the right political connections, and transformed a mob empire into something that looked almost respectable. Almost. She arrived exactly on time. Mid-50s, dressed in a way that suggested wealth without advertising it. She had her father's eyes, dark and assessing, missing nothing. "Miss Moretti," she extended her hand. "Thank you for seeing me." "Mrs. Castellano." "Andrea, please. Mrs. Castellano was my mother, and she's been dead 10 years. They sat in Serena's office. Andrea declined coffee, got straight to business. "I'm sure you've researched me, so you know my family's history." "I do." "Then you understand why I need someone who knows how to navigate complicated legal situations. Someone who understands where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking." "What's the situation?" Andrea pulled out a folder. "My nephew, Marco Castellano. He's been running one of our restaurant groups. Good kid, smart, stays out of trouble. But he's gotten involved with someone who doesn't share our commitment to legitimate business." She slid a photograph across the desk. Young man, late 20s, expensive suit. Standing next to him was someone Serena recognized from Damien's world, Vincent Russo, the one who'd disappeared before the arrests. Vincent approached Marco 6 months ago, offered to invest in an expansion, help open new locations. Marco said yes before consulting with me. And now Vincent wants something in return. Yes. He wants to use the restaurants to launder money. Claims Marco owes him for the investment. Says if he refuses, certain information about our family's past might become public. What information? Things that happened 30 years ago. Things that were supposed to be settled. Andrea's expression hardened. Things that could still cause legal problems if the right prosecutor decided to investigate. Serena studied the photograph. Vincent had always been the smartest of Damien's crew, smart enough to run when he saw the arrests coming, smart enough to hide until things cooled down, and apparently smart enough to find new victims. "What do you want from me?" "I want Vincent gone. I want Marco protected, and I want it done legally." Andrea met her eyes. "I've spent 20 years making this family legitimate. I won't let some second-rate criminal drag us back into the mud." Legal options are limited. If Vincent has actual leverage, then we find better leverage, or we find a way to neutralize what he has. Andrea leaned forward. "You dismantled your husband's entire operation from the inside. You protected yourself while destroying him. I need that same kind of precision applied to this situation." It was flattering and disturbing in equal measure. Serena had spent months trying to distance herself from what she'd done to Damien. Now someone wanted to hire her specifically because of it. "I'll need full disclosure. Every detail of Vincent's involvement, every communication with Marco, everything. You'll have it. Andrea stood. And Miss Moretti? I pay extremely well for discretion and results. After she left, Serena sat alone in her office and stared at Vincent's photograph. He was a loose end from her old life, showing up in her new one like a ghost she couldn't quite exorcise. Part of her wanted to refuse the case, keep her distance from anything connected to Damien's world. But another part, the part that had spent 12 years solving impossible problems, was already thinking through solutions. She called David that evening. I need information on Vincent Russo. Where he is, what he's doing, who he's connected to. Why? She explained the situation. David was quiet for a long moment. This feels dangerous, Serena. Vincent isn't like Damien. He's actually smart, and he's got nothing to lose. Which is why he needs to be handled carefully. Or not handled at all. You could refuse the case. I could, but Andrea Castellano is exactly the kind of client I need. High profile, legitimate, willing to pay premium rates. She paused. And if I can pull this off, it proves I can handle complicated situations without crossing legal lines. Or it proves you're still playing with fire. Maybe he was right, but Serena had learned that sometimes the only way forward was through the flames. She spent the next week building a case file on Vincent. David's contacts provided surveillance photos, financial records, communication intercepts. The picture that emerged was of a man desperately trying to rebuild what he'd lost when Damien's organization collapsed. He'd approached several legitimate businesses, always with the same pitch: investment capital in exchange for access to their financial structures. Most had refused. Marco Castellano had been naive enough to accept. Serena met with Marco at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. He looked nervous, kept glancing around like he expected someone to be watching. Maybe someone was. Your aunt said you wanted to help, he said, stirring sugar into espresso he wouldn't drink. I want to understand the situation first. Tell me exactly how Vincent approached you. Marco explained. Investment opportunity, favorable terms, cash up front. He'd been trying to expand the restaurant group, needed capital, and Vincent's offer had seemed perfect. Too perfect, obviously, but Marco had been young and ambitious and hadn't asked enough questions. When did he start asking for favors? About a month after the money came through. Small things at first. Could he use one of the restaurants for a private meeting? Could he store some inventory in our warehouse? Could he run some expenses through our accounts? Did you agree? To the meetings, yes. The other stuff, I said I needed to check with my aunt first. He finally looked at her. That's when he started making threats. What kind of threats? He said he knew things about my family, about my grandfather's business, things that could cause problems if they became public. Marco's hands were shaking. He said the statute of limitations doesn't apply to everything, that sometimes old crimes can still bite you. Serena knew that was partially true. Some crimes never expired. But Vincent was probably bluffing, using fear to manipulate someone who didn't know better. Did he show you any actual evidence? Documents, old ledgers, photographs. He said he'd been collecting them for years, insurance policy in case he ever needed it. That was more concerning. If Vincent actually had documentary evidence of past crimes, he had real leverage. The question was whether that evidence would hold up to scrutiny, or if it was just good enough to scare people who didn't want to risk finding out. I need you to set up a meeting with Vincent. Tell him you've convinced your aunt to cooperate. She won't actually cooperate, but Vincent doesn't need to know that yet. Serena pulled out a business card. Have him call this number. Say you've hired a consultant to help structure the arrangement properly. Marco took the card. What are you going to do? What I do best. Find the weakness and exploit it. The meeting with Vincent happened on a Wednesday afternoon at a restaurant in Queens. Not one of Marco's places. Neutral ground. Serena arrived early, chose a table with a view of the entrance, and waited. Vincent walked in 15 minutes late. Deliberate power play. He'd probably been watching from across the street, making sure she came alone. He slid into the seat across from her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Moretti, or should I say Mrs., I heard the divorce isn't final yet. Ms. is fine. I have to admit, I was surprised when Marco said he'd hired you. Didn't think you'd want anything to do with our world anymore. I'm a consultant now. I help clients navigate complicated situations. This qualifies. Vincent ordered coffee he wouldn't drink. Same power play Marco had tried. Men and their little games. So Marco tells me his aunt wants to cooperate, that she understands the value of maintaining good relationships with people who've invested in her business. Andrea wants to understand exactly what kind of cooperation you're looking for and what you're offering in return. What I'm offering is silence about things that happened a long time ago, things that could still cause problems for a family trying to stay legitimate. What kind of things? The kind that federal prosecutors love: money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy. The Castellano family spent decades building a criminal empire. They think they cleaned it all up, but evidence doesn't disappear just because you want it to. Serena kept her expression neutral. You have this evidence? Copies. Originals are somewhere safe. He leaned back, confident. And before you think about trying to steal it or destroy it, know that I've made arrangements. If something happens to me, everything goes public. To the FBI, to prosecutors, to the media. Andrea's precious legitimate business gets buried under her father's crimes. That seems like a lot of effort just to launder money through some restaurants. It's not about the money. It's about building back what I lost. Damien's operation is gone thanks to you. I need something new. The Castellano family's infrastructure is perfect. There it was. This wasn't just extortion. It was Vincent trying to rebuild, using someone else's legitimate business as camouflage for his criminal operations. What specifically do you want? Access to their financial accounts, ability to move money through their businesses, cooperation with certain transactions that might need explanation if anyone asks questions. He smiled. Basically, I want what you gave Damien, a smart woman making everything look legal while I make money. And if Andrea refuses, then her family's past becomes present, and all those years of going legitimate mean nothing. Serena nodded slowly, like she was considering it. I'll need to discuss this with my client. Get back to you within a week. Don't take too long. I'm not a patient man. She left the restaurant and drove straight to Andrea's office. Laid out everything Vincent had said, everything he'd threatened. Andrea listened without interrupting. When Serena finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Can he actually do what he's threatening? Make our past relevant again? Possibly. It depends on what evidence he has and how convincing it is. Some crimes don't expire. And even if the evidence isn't strong enough for prosecution, it could be strong enough for investigation, which means lawyers, headlines, damage to your reputation. So we're trapped. No, we're just in a complicated position. Serena pulled out her laptop. But complicated is what I do. She'd spent the past week building a profile on Vincent, his finances, his connections, his movement since disappearing from New York. He was living in Philadelphia, operating on the edges of organized crime there, making just enough money to survive but not enough to rebuild the lifestyle he'd lost. More importantly, he was desperate. And desperate people made mistakes. Vincent thinks his leverage is the evidence he has on your family, but his real vulnerability is what he doesn't have: legitimate income, legal protection, a future that doesn't end in prison or worse. How does that help us? Because we can offer him something better than extortion money. We can offer him a way out. Andrea frowned. You want to help him? I want to neutralize him. And the best way to do that is to give him what he thinks he wants, then make sure it destroys him instead of you. Over the next 3 days, Serena built a trap. She worked with David to create a corporate structure that looked perfect for money laundering, but was actually a legal minefield. Shell companies with hidden reporting requirements. Accounts that triggered automatic audits. Transfers that looked clean but left paper trails prosecutors would love. Then she brought Victor Chen into it. They met at the same coffee shop where she'd first agreed to cooperate. Victor listened to her proposal with growing interest. So you want me to let this guy incriminate himself? I want you to give him rope and watch him hang himself with it. Vincent approaches legitimate businesses, tries to corrupt them, commits new crimes while thinking he's being smart. You document everything, build a case, arrest him before he can actually damage anyone. And the Castellano family? Cooperates fully, provides evidence of Vincent's extortion attempts, testifies about his threats, helps you build a racketeering case. Serena leaned forward. Andrea spent 20 years going legitimate. She's not going to throw that away to protect someone extorting her. Victor was quiet. thinking it through. The evidence Vincent has on the Castellanos. Does it pose a real threat? I'd need to see it to know for sure. But even if it does, cooperation and testimony could offset that, especially if the crimes were committed by people who are already dead. You've thought this through. It's what I'm good at. He agreed, with conditions. Andrea would cooperate fully, make no deals with Vincent without informing the FBI, wear a wire if needed. In exchange, any investigation into the Castellano family's past would be handled with discretion, and cooperation would be weighed heavily if charges were ever considered. Serena presented the plan to Andrea that evening, laid out every step, every risk, every potential outcome. This could still blow up, Serena said. Vincent could get suspicious, could run, could release whatever evidence he has just to cause damage. It's not without risk. But it's better than the alternative. Yes. Andrea was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, sharp and satisfied. My father always said the best way to deal with a threat is to make it eat itself. Let's do it. They set the trap carefully. Marco called Vincent, said his aunt had agreed to cooperate. They scheduled a meeting to discuss specifics. Vincent arrived confident, ready to claim his victory. What he didn't know was that the restaurant where they met was wired, that every word he said was being recorded, that the corporate documents Marco showed him were designed to incriminate rather than protect. Vincent talked for 2 hours, explained exactly how he wanted to use the Castellano businesses, detailed his plans to launder money, hide assets, rebuild his criminal network, got specific about amounts, methods, connections, hung himself with every word. The FBI arrested him 3 days later, caught him in Philadelphia with documents linking him to multiple criminal enterprises, recorded conversations proving intent to commit fraud and money laundering, and evidence that he'd been extorting the Castellano family. The charges were extensive. The evidence was overwhelming. Vincent's leverage evaporated the moment he got arrested because threatening to release old evidence while actively committing new crimes just made prosecutors' jobs easier. He took a plea deal within a month. 15 years, no parole. In exchange, he gave up his sources, his contacts, and every piece of evidence he'd been using to threaten people. Andrea called Serena when it was over. It's done. Vincent's lawyer confirmed the plea agreement. He's gone. Good. My nephew wants to thank you personally. So do I. Not necessary. You paid me well. It's not about the money, Serena. It's about what you did. You took an impossible situation and turned it into a victory. That's rare. After they hung up, Serena sat in her office and felt something close to satisfaction. Not joy. This wasn't about happiness, but competence. The ability to solve a problem completely, legally, without compromising herself in the process. She'd done that. Built something good from the skills she'd learned doing bad things. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about using what you'd learned to build something better. The trial date for Damien's case was moved up to February. David called with the news, warned her again about testifying in open court. His lawyers are going to attack your credibility. Paint you as a scorned wife seeking revenge. Let them. The evidence speaks for itself. They'll bring up your role in building the structures, try to make you look complicit. I have immunity. They can't touch me legally. But they can damage you publicly, make it harder to build your new career. Serena thought about that. Thought about Lauren and Hastings' strategic group, and clients who might not want to work with someone whose name got dragged through courtroom drama. What's the alternative? Refuse to testify, violate my agreement, lose my immunity? No, just be prepared. This won't be easy. She spent the next 2 weeks preparing with Victor's team, reviewing documents, practicing testimony, anticipating defense strategies. They drilled her on every detail of the corporate structure she'd built, every account she'd managed, every conversation she'd had with Damien about the business. By the time the trial started, she could recite it all in her sleep. The courtroom was exactly what she'd expected. Lots of wood and marble and flags, designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. Damien sat at the defense table looking thinner, older, defeated. He didn't look at her when she walked in. The prosecution called her on day 3. She took the stand, swore to tell the truth, and spent 6 hours doing exactly that. Explained the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the elaborate structures designed to hide criminal proceeds, named Damien as the person who directed the criminal activity, herself as the person who'd built the framework to facilitate it. The defense attorney was exactly the type she'd expected. Mid-50s, expensive suit, condescending smile. Mrs. Moretti, isn't it true that you built these structures without your husband's knowledge? No, he knew about all of them. But he didn't understand them, did he? You testified that he often signed documents without reading them. That was his choice. I offered to explain everything. He preferred not to know the details. How convenient. So you built an elaborate criminal infrastructure, and now you're blaming your husband for it. I'm not blaming him. I'm testifying about what happened. You're testifying after receiving full immunity from prosecution. Immunity you received in exchange for cooperating against your husband. Isn't that right? Yes. So you have every incentive to make him look guilty and yourself look innocent. Victor stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. The defense attorney tried different angles, suggested she'd been manipulating Damien all along, that he was a victim of her schemes rather than the architect of them. Implied she'd turned on him because of the affair, that this was revenge dressed up as justice. Serena answered each question calmly, factually, never got defensive, never showed emotion, just stated what had happened and let the evidence speak for itself. By the end of the day, she was exhausted. But she'd done it, told the truth, stood by it, refused to be intimidated. Damien's attorney called him to testify the next week. He tried to play the victim, the hard-working businessman who'd trusted his wife to handle legal details, only to discover she'd been building a criminal empire behind his back. It didn't work. Too much evidence contradicted him. Too many witnesses had already testified about his direct involvement in criminal activities. The jury deliberated for 3 days, came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge scheduled sentencing for March. Serena wasn't there for the verdict. She'd already given her testimony, fulfilled her obligation. What happened to Damien now was between him and the justice system he'd spent years evading. She was in her office when David called with the news. Guilty, every count. Good. He's looking at 25 to 30 years. With his age and health, it's probably a life sentence. She felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, just a kind of neutral acceptance of an inevitable outcome. Thank you for letting me know. How are you doing? Really? I'm fine, David. Actually fine, not pretending fine. And she was. The trial was over. The testimony was complete. The last thread connecting her to Damien's world had been severed. What remained was just her, building a career, helping clients, living a life that was entirely her own. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was real, honest, clean. That was more than she'd had in years. March arrived with a kind of weather that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Snow one day, rain the next, occasionally a few hours of sun that felt like a promise the city wouldn't keep. Serena had stopped paying attention to forecasts. Weather happened whether you prepared for it or not. Damien's sentencing was scheduled for the 15th. David called the morning of, asked if she wanted to attend. Why would I? Closure, maybe, a chance to see it finished. It's already finished. Whether I'm in that courtroom or not doesn't change the sentence. Fair enough. He paused. For what it's worth, I think you handled everything as well as anyone could have. Better than most. Thanks, David. She hung up and went to work. Had a meeting with a new client at 10. Lunch with Lauren at noon. Afternoon sessions reviewing corporate structures for the Hendricks family. Normal work. Legal work. The kind of day that would have bored her 12 months ago, but now felt like exactly what she needed. Lauren mentioned the sentencing over lunch. I saw the news. Today's the day. Yes? You're not going? No point. I already know how it ends. Lauren studied her over her wine glass. You're different than I expected. When I first reached out, I thought you'd be bitter, angry, looking for ways to keep punishing him. I was never trying to punish him. I was trying to protect myself. And now? Now I'm trying to build something that doesn't depend on anyone else's choices. Serena set down her fork. For 12 years, my life was about managing Damien's chaos, fixing his mistakes, covering his crimes, making sure everything looked legitimate from the outside. I got good at it. Too good. But you don't want to do that anymore. I want to use those skills for something that doesn't require lying about what I'm doing. Is that possible? I don't know. But I'm going to find out. Lauren smiled. You're already finding out. The Castellano case proved that. The Castellano case had done more than prove competence. It had opened doors. 3 more families had approached Hastings' strategic group, specifically requesting Serena's involvement. All of them had complicated pasts and uncertain futures. All of them needed someone who understood the difference between hiding crimes and protecting assets. She was building a reputation, not the reputation she'd had as Damien's wife, invisible, efficient, dangerous if you looked too closely, but a new reputation as someone who could solve problems other people couldn't, who understood the gray areas where law and survival intersected. It wasn't perfect. Some potential clients still viewed her with suspicion, saw her cooperation against Damien as betrayal rather than self-preservation. But others saw exactly what Lauren had seen: competence, precision, and the willingness to do what needed to be done. The sentencing news broke around 3 that afternoon. Serena was in a meeting when her phone started buzzing with news alerts. She ignored them, finished the meeting, then checked the headlines in her office. 28 years, federal prison, no parole. Damien would be 73 when he got out, assuming he lived that long. She sat with that information for a while, tried to feel something about it, came up empty. David called an hour later. You saw? I saw. His lawyer's already talking about appeals. They won't go anywhere, but they'll try. Let them. There's something else. David's tone shifted. Bianca was at the sentencing. She tried to give a statement about how Damien was a good man who'd made mistakes, how he deserved leniency. The judge shut her down pretty quickly. Serena almost laughed. Bianca still didn't understand, still thought charm and tears could fix what evidence had proven, still believed in a version of Damien that had never actually existed. She's welcome to visit him in prison for the next 3 decades. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. Somehow I doubt she will. David paused. Your divorce was finalized this morning, by the way. Just came through. I meant to call earlier, but things got busy. Divorced. Officially, legally single. 12 years of marriage ended with the judge's signature while her former husband was being sentenced in a different courtroom across town. Thanks for handling it. Do you want to meet for a drink? Celebrate? Celebrate what? Freedom. New beginnings. Whatever you want to call it. She thought about it. Thought about sitting in a bar with David, drinking wine, talking about everything that had happened and everything that was coming. It sounded exhausting. Rain check. I have work to finish. After he hung up, she sat in her office and looked out at the city. Boston wasn't New York. Smaller, older, less frantic. But it had the same energy underneath, that hunger for success and fear of failure that drove people to do stupid things in pursuit of smart outcomes. She understood that hunger, had spent years feeding it in someone else. Now she was learning to feed it in herself, in ways that didn't require destroying everything to prove she could. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. She'd started answering those again, had learned most of them were legitimate. This is Serena. Miss Moretti, my name is Catherine Morrison. I'm the executive director of the Willow Foundation. We work with women transitioning out of difficult situations, domestic violence, financial abuse, incarceration. I was hoping we could talk. About what? About you joining our board of directors. That was unexpected. I'm not sure I'm the right fit for something like that. On the contrary, I think you're exactly the right fit. You understand complicated financial situations. You know how people use money to control and manipulate. And you successfully extracted yourself from a dangerous relationship. Catherine's voice was warm but professional. We could use that expertise. And honestly, your name recognition would help with fundraising. My name recognition as the mob wife who testified against her husband? Your name recognition as a woman who refused to be destroyed by someone else's crimes. We work with a lot of women who need to see that survival is possible, that you can rebuild. You're proof of that. Serena didn't answer immediately. The idea of being proof of anything felt presumptuous. She'd survived, yes, but she'd also built the structures that enabled Damien's crimes in the first place. That wasn't exactly inspirational. Can I think about it? Of course, but I hope you'll seriously consider it. We could do a lot of good together. After the call ended, Serena pulled up the Willow Foundation's website. It was legitimate, registered nonprofit, transparent financials, good reviews. They ran shelters, provided legal assistance, helped women navigate divorce and custody battles and financial independence. The kind of help she could have used 12 years ago if she'd been smart enough to ask for it. She forwarded the information to David with a note. Thoughts on this? He called back within an hour. It's a good organization, clean finances, solid reputation. Why are they approaching you? Want me on their board? Do you want to be on their board? I don't know. Is it a conflict of interest with my work? Probably not, as long as you're not advising them on anything that could be construed as helping people hide assets from divorce proceedings. But as a board member, focusing on fundraising and visibility, that's fine. She told Catherine yes 2 days later. The announcement went public the following week. It generated some press. Former mob wife joins nonprofit board, turns scandal into service, all the usual narrative arcs that people loved. But it also generated donations. Women who'd followed the Damien case sent money, wrote letters, shared their own stories of financial abuse and complicated escapes. The foundation's visibility tripled within a month. Serena attended her first board meeting in April, sat around a table with 5 other women who'd built careers in law, business, social work. They treated her like a colleague, not a curiosity, asked her opinion on budgets and strategy and donor cultivation. It felt strange, good strange. After the meeting, Catherine pulled her aside. There's someone I'd like you to meet, a woman who came to us 2 months ago. Her husband controlled all their money, didn't let her have accounts in her own name, used finances to keep her trapped. She's trying to get out, but she doesn't understand how everything is structured. And you want me to help? I want you to show her that understanding is possible, that she can learn this stuff, that being smart about money isn't reserved for people like her husband. The woman's name was Jennifer. Early 30s, exhausted eyes, nervous hands. She met Serena at a coffee shop with a folder full of documents she'd managed to copy before leaving her husband. I don't understand any of this, Jennifer said, spreading papers across the table. He always said I didn't need to worry about it, that he was handling everything. But now I'm trying to leave and I don't even know what we have or where it is. Serena looked through the documents, saw immediately what the husband had done. Created a maze of accounts and trusts and corporate entities designed to be incomprehensible to anyone who wasn't looking closely. It was effective. It was also fixable. Okay, she said, let me show you what you're actually looking at here. She spent 3 hours walking Jennifer through the structures, explained what each entity was, how they connected, where the actual assets were versus where they appeared to be, showed her how to trace money, how to identify what was legitimately his versus what should be considered marital property. By the end, Jennifer was taking notes, asking questions, starting to understand. This is all designed to confuse you, Serena said, to make you think you're not smart enough to understand your own financial life. But you are. You just need someone to translate the deliberately complicated language into something clear. Did your husband do this to you? In his own way. He didn't create structures to hide things from me. I created them for him. But he did try to make me think I needed him, that I couldn't survive without his protection, his resources, his approval. Serena gathered the documents back into order. Turns out I could survive just fine. Better than fine. Jennifer left with copies of everything, annotated with Serena's notes explaining what each piece meant. 3 weeks later, Catherine called to say Jennifer had filed for divorce with a lawyer who actually understood the financial complexity, that she was fighting for what was rightfully hers instead of accepting whatever her husband offered. You did that, Catherine said. You gave her the tools to fight back. Maybe. Or maybe Jennifer had always had the strength and just needed someone to show her where to direct it. Either way, it felt like something worth doing. By May, Serena's caseload was more than she could handle alone. Lauren offered her a senior associate and more office space. The Castellano family had referred 5 more clients. The foundation work was taking up 2 evenings a week plus weekend time. She was building something, not the shadow empire she'd built for Damien, but a legitimate career based on skills she'd learned in illegitimate contexts. It was messy and complicated, and sometimes she felt like a fraud, but it was hers. David took her to dinner for her 39th birthday. Expensive restaurant, good wine, conversation that stayed carefully away from anything heavy. You look different, he said over dessert. Different how? Lighter, like you're not carrying something heavy all the time. She thought about that. The weight she'd carried for 12 years, Damien's secrets, his crimes, the constant vigilance required to keep everything from collapsing. She'd gotten so used to it, she'd forgotten what it felt like to move through the world without that burden. I'm not responsible for anyone else's choices anymore, just my own. And how's that working out? Some days better than others, but it's progress. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. Saw the foundation announcement. Good work. Proud of you. She stared at it. No name, no context, but something about the phrasing felt familiar. She typed back, "Who is this?" The response came a minute later. "Someone who knew you'd land on your feet. Take care of yourself, Serena." Then nothing. She tried calling the number. Disconnected. Tried tracing it through methods David had taught her. Burner phone. Impossible to track. "Everything okay?" David asked. "Yeah, just someone from my past checking in." She didn't know who. Could have been one of Damien's associates who'd avoided arrest. Could have been someone from the prosecutor's office. Could have been anyone who'd watched her testimony and decided she deserved encouragement. Whoever it was, they were gone now. Just another ghost from a life she'd left behind. The divorce settlement was finalized in June. Serena got the Connecticut house, the clean assets, and the legitimate business holdings. Damien got nothing except whatever he could buy in prison commissary with the money his family sent him. She sold the Connecticut house 2 weeks later. Couldn't stand to live in it anymore. Couldn't stand what it represented. Used the money to buy a smaller place in Cambridge, modern, clean, hers from the first brick to the last light fixture. She was hanging art in the living room when Lauren called. "I have a proposition for you. Partnership. Full partner, your name on the letterhead, equal vote in firm decisions." Serena set down the hammer. "That's fast. I've only been here 6 months. And in 6 months, you've brought in 12 major clients, solved 2 impossible cases, and built a reputation that's attracting attention from families across the East Coast. You've earned it. What about the other partners? They okay with this?" "They voted unanimously. You're good at this, Serena. Really good. And we want to make sure you stay." She looked around her new apartment, her space, her choices, her life. 6 months ago, she'd been testifying against her husband in federal court. Now she was being offered partnership in a prestigious consulting firm. "I'll need to review the terms." "Of course, but I hope you'll say yes. We're better with you than without you." She said yes 3 days later. The announcement went out to clients and press simultaneously. Serena Moretti, partner at Hastings Strategic Group. The coverage was mostly positive. Woman rebuilds career after testifying against criminal husband, turned scandal into success, all the narrative arcs people loved about redemption. Some coverage was less kind, questioned whether someone who'd built criminal structures should be trusted with legitimate ones, implied she'd only avoided prosecution because she'd been willing to betray her husband, suggested her success was built on notoriety rather than competence. She ignored it, had learned that you couldn't control what people said about you, only what you did, and what she was doing was building. July brought a letter from Damien, forwarded through David, who'd opened it first to make sure it wasn't threatening. "It's just a letter," David said when he called. "He's asking to see you, says he wants to apologize." "No." "You sure? Might give you closure." "I have closure. He's in prison for 28 years. That's all the closure I need." But the letter stayed in her bag for 3 days before she finally opened it. Damien's handwriting, messier than she remembered. Prison had aged it like everything else. "Serena, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What you did for me all those years. How much you held together. I took it for granted because I'm an idiot who thought being respected meant being feared. You tried to tell me the difference, and I didn't listen. I'm sorry. For the gala, for Bianca, for every time I made you feel like you didn't matter. You were always smarter than me. I just wish I'd realized it before you had to prove it by destroying me. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. You deserve it more than anyone." D, she read it twice. Felt nothing the first time. Something complicated the second time. Not forgiveness. He was right about not deserving that. But maybe understanding. He'd finally figured out what she'd always known. Too late to matter, but at least he'd gotten there. She burned the letter in her fireplace that night, watched it curl and blacken and disappear into ash. Let him have his apology and his realization. She didn't need either. August was when Bianca resurfaced. Serena saw her on the news first. Some interview on a cable show about women who dated criminals. Bianca played the victim card hard, talked about how she'd been manipulated by Damien, how she'd had no idea about his criminal activities, how she was rebuilding her life through faith and determination. The host asked about Serena. "I think she's very brave," Bianca said, voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. "To testify against your own husband takes courage. I just wish she'd reached out to me, you know? We could have supported each other through this difficult time." Serena laughed out loud when she heard that. Bianca wanted support from the woman she'd publicly humiliated? The delusion was almost impressive. 2 weeks later, Bianca reached out directly. Email to Serena's business address, asking to meet, claiming she wanted to apologize and find closure. Serena deleted it without responding. Bianca tried again and again. Finally left a voicemail that was equal parts apologetic and entitled. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. What I did at the gala was wrong, but I was young and stupid, and Damien told me you guys were basically already over. I didn't know he was lying. I want to apologize, face to face, woman to woman. Please, Serena, give me a chance to make this right." She sounded sincere, probably even believed she was. But Serena had no interest in absolution tours that existed to make someone else feel better. She had David send a formal response. "Ms. Moretti appreciates your concern, but has no interest in meeting. Please don't contact her again." Bianca went to the press instead, gave an interview claiming Serena had refused to accept her apology, that she was bitter and vindictive, that she couldn't let go of the past. The story got picked up by a few outlets, generated some social media discussion, then died because people had moved on to newer scandals. Serena kept working, helped families protect their assets, served on the foundation board, built relationships with clients who valued competence over drama. September marked 1 year since the gala. 1 year since Bianca had told her to step aside. 1 year since she'd started dismantling everything she'd built. Serena was in her office when the anniversary hit, reviewing contracts for a new client. She almost missed it until her phone calendar reminded her. 1 year ago, the night everything changed. She'd set that reminder back in November, when she'd been hiding in a hotel room waiting for Damien to be arrested. Thought she'd want to mark the anniversary somehow, acknowledge the transformation. Now it just felt arbitrary. The date didn't matter. What mattered was what had come after. Lauren knocked on her door around noon. "Want to grab lunch? There's something I want to discuss." They went to the same restaurant where Lauren had first made the partnership offer, ordered the same wine, sat at a similar table. "I've been thinking about expansion," Lauren said. "Opening an office in New York, bringing our services to a bigger market." "Makes sense. I want you to run it." Serena set down her wine glass. "Run what?" "The New York office. Build the team, develop the client base, establish our presence. You know the city, you understand the market, and you have connections we couldn't buy." "Those connections are mostly criminals or people who hate me." "Some of them, but not all. Andrea Castellano isn't a criminal. The families you've worked with aren't criminals. And even the people who hate you, well, sometimes respect matters more than affection." Serena thought about New York, the city she'd left, the life she'd abandoned. Going back felt like regression, like returning to something she'd escaped, but it also felt like completion. Returning on her own terms, with her own business, building her own empire instead of hiding in someone else's shadow. When would this happen? Next spring. That gives you time to plan, to identify potential clients, to build the infrastructure. Lauren leaned forward. "Think about it. New York office, your name on the door, your team, your vision. Everything you built for Damien, but this time it's yours." She thought about it for 3 days, made lists of pros and cons, analyzed markets and opportunities, ran financial projections. Then she said yes. The announcement went public in October. Hastings Strategic Group expanding to Manhattan, Serena Moretti leading the new office, opening spring of next year. The coverage was extensive. Former mob wife returns to New York as legitimate businesswoman. Criminal past becomes professional asset. All the redemption narratives wrapped in business section respectability. She fielded interview requests, declined most of them, accepted a few that seemed legitimate, told her story carefully. acknowledged the past without dwelling in it, focused on the future without promising perfection. One interview with the business magazine asked the question everyone wanted answered: do you regret the choices that led to this? Serena thought about that. The marriage to Damien, the 12 years building his empire, the skills she'd learned that now served her legally. I regret hurting people. I regret that my competence enabled crimes. But do I regret learning what I learned? No. I just wish I'd learned it in a classroom instead of in a criminal organization. What would you tell other women in similar situations? That you're smarter than you think. That the person controlling you wants you to believe you need them, but you don't. And that rebuilding is possible. Hard, but possible. The interview ran in November, generated positive response, attracted more clients. By December, Serena had hired 2 associates and a paralegal for the New York office, found office space in Midtown, signed a lease, started building infrastructure. She spent Christmas alone again. Not in the Berkshires this time, back in Cambridge, in her own apartment, with her own traditions. Made herself dinner, drank good wine, watched the city lights, and felt something close to contentment, not happiness. She was suspicious of happiness, had learned it was too fragile to depend on. But contentment, the satisfaction of having built something solid, something hers, that felt sustainable. David called around 9. Merry Christmas. You too. How are you celebrating? Quietly. You? Same. My sister's family is too loud for me these days. He paused. I'm proud of you, Serena. What you've built this year, it's impressive. Thanks, David. For everything. You could have walked away when things got complicated. You didn't. You're a good client and a good person, despite what some people say. After he hung up, she poured another glass of wine and pulled up her financials. The legitimate ones. The businesses she'd built since leaving Damien. $22 million in assets under management. 8 major clients. Partnership in a prestigious firm. Board position at a nonprofit. New York office opening in 4 months. Not bad for a year that had started with public humiliation and federal testimony. She thought about Damien in prison, serving year 1 of 28. Thought about Bianca doing interviews and making excuses. Thought about all those people who'd underestimated her and were now watching her succeed. None of them mattered. What mattered was this: the life she'd built, the reputation she'd earned, the freedom she'd claimed. The New York office opened in April, exactly on schedule. Glass and steel and carefully chosen furniture that suggested success without advertising it. Serena stood in the empty space the night before opening and felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. She'd built this, not for someone else, not to hide crimes or enable bad behavior. For herself. Legally, ethically, completely. The opening reception was small, selective. Clients, colleagues, a few press outlets. Andrea Castellano came, brought her nephew Marco, thanked Serena publicly for helping their family navigate difficult circumstances. Catherine from the Willow Foundation came, brought Jennifer, the woman Serena had helped understand her finances, who'd successfully divorced her controlling husband and was starting her own business. Lauren came, gave a speech about vision and competence and the future of strategic consulting. Serena stood among them and realized something. She'd built a community. Not the dangerous network of Damien's associates, but a legitimate community of people who valued what she could do and who she'd become. The speech she'd prepared was short, direct. Thanked people for their support, outlined the office's mission, promised results without making guarantees she couldn't keep. Then she said something she hadn't planned. A year and a half ago, I was someone else. Someone who'd spent 12 years making other people successful while staying invisible. I was good at it. Too good. And when that life fell apart, I didn't know if I could build something new, if the skills I'd developed could be used for anything legitimate, if anyone would trust someone with my history. She looked around the room, all these people who'd given her chances, who'd seen potential instead of just scandal. Thank you for proving that rebuilding is possible, that expertise doesn't have to be destroyed because it was learned in the wrong context, that people can change, grow, become better versions of themselves without erasing who they were. The applause was genuine, sustained. When it ended, people came up to shake her hand, offer congratulations, discuss potential business. She was still talking to clients when she saw someone familiar near the door. took her a moment to place him. Victor Chen, the federal prosecutor who'd taken down Damien. He waited until she was free, then approached with a slight smile. Impressive space. Congratulations. Thank you. What brings you here? Curiosity. Wanted to see what you'd built. He looked around. I have to admit, when you first came to me, I wasn't sure you'd survive all this. Testifying against your husband, rebuilding your life, dealing with the publicity. A lot of people would have collapsed under that pressure. I'm not a lot of people. No, you're not. He handed her a card. If you ever need anything, legal advice, a reference, help with clients who might have federal concerns, call me. What you did took courage. I don't forget that. After he left, Serena stood alone for a moment, holding the card. Victor Chen, the man who'd prosecuted her husband, offering to help her succeed. It felt like completion. The business grew through summer. 8 clients became 12, then 15. Serena hired 2 more associates, expanded the office, built relationships with law firms and banks and family offices that needed sophisticated asset protection. She was invited to speak at conferences, contribute to industry publications, serve on panels about financial planning and legal strategy. Some invitations mentioned her background explicitly. Former mob wife turned legitimate consultant, scandal survivor sharing lessons learned. Others focused purely on her expertise, treating her past as irrelevant to her present competence. She accepted both types, refused to be defined by her past, but also refused to pretend it hadn't happened. In August, 18 months after the gala, she was profiled in Forbes. The article was titled "The Strategist: How Serena Moretti Rebuilt an Empire, Legally This Time." It detailed her career, her testimony, her rebuilding, interviewed clients who praised her work, competitors who acknowledged her skill, and Catherine from the foundation who talked about Serena's volunteer work helping women escape financial abuse. The article ended with a question: what's next for Serena Moretti? Her answer? Building something sustainable, something that helps people instead of hurting them, something I can be proud of 20 years from now. The article generated more business, more attention, more opportunities. But it also generated something she hadn't expected, a letter from Bianca. It arrived at the office, forwarded through the firm's general mail. Handwritten, several pages, rambling, and emotional. I saw the Forbes article. You look successful. Happy, even. I'm glad one of us figured it out. I wanted you to know I'm sorry, really sorry. Not just for the gala, but for everything. For thinking I could take something that belonged to you. For believing Damien when he said you didn't care. For being too stupid to understand what I was destroying. You were right to walk away. Right to protect yourself. Right to let it all collapse. I just wish I'd been smart enough to see it before I became part of the wreckage. I'm working as a hostess again. Different club, different city, trying to rebuild. It's hard. Harder than I thought. Everyone knows who I am, what I did. Nobody trusts me. I guess I understand that now. Anyway, I wanted you to know I'm sorry. You don't have to forgive me. I wouldn't. But I wanted to say it. Bianca. Serena read it twice. Felt something like pity, which was probably the most generous emotion she could manage for someone who'd tried to steal her life. She didn't respond. But she didn't throw it away either. Filed it somewhere safe. Evidence that people could grow even when that growth came too late to matter. September brought the 2-year anniversary of the gala. This time, Serena didn't set a reminder. Didn't need to mark it, didn't need to acknowledge it. She was in a client meeting when the date passed, discussing asset protection strategies for a family with complicated international holdings. The kind of work she was good at, the kind that challenged her without compromising her. After the meeting, she stood in her office looking out at Manhattan, the city that had been her home, then her prison, then her escape, and now her territory again. Different territory this time, not the shadow world of criminal enterprise, but the legitimate landscape of business and law and strategy. She'd rebuilt. Not perfectly. There were still clients who wouldn't work with her, still people who viewed her past as disqualifying, still moments when she wondered if she deserved success built on skills learned through crime. But she'd rebuilt, created something solid and legitimate and hers. Her phone rang. David. Have you seen the news? What news? Damien. Heart attack. He's in the prison hospital. It's not looking good. Serena sat down. felt that same nothing she'd felt when he was sentenced, when the divorce finalized, when she'd burned his letter. Is he going to make it? Don't know yet. Thought you'd want to know. After he hung up, she sat in her office as the city darkened around her. Thought about Damien dying in a prison hospital, alone, paying for choices he'd made and choices she'd enabled. She didn't call the prison, didn't ask for updates, just went home, poured wine, and waited. He died 2 days later. Heart attack, complications, deceased at 52 years old. The news coverage was minimal. Former crime boss dies in prison. Investigation proved corruption in construction industry. Case led to multiple convictions. Serena's name appeared in one sentence. Moretti's estranged wife cooperated with prosecutors and now runs a strategic consulting firm in Manhattan. That was it. Her entire marriage, 12 years of her life, reduced to a dependent clause in someone else's obituary. David called. You okay? Yeah. Need anything? No, I'm fine. And she was. Damien's death didn't change anything, didn't erase what he'd done or what she'd survived. It was just the final punctuation on a story that had already ended. She didn't attend the funeral, sent flowers instead, unsigned. Let his family and whatever friends still claimed him handle the grief and logistics. She had work to do. 3 months later, in December, Serena stood on the stage at a business conference in Chicago. She'd been invited to speak about strategic asset protection, crisis management, and rebuilding after scandal. The room was full. 400 people, mostly professionals, attorneys, financial advisors, corporate consultants, people who wanted to learn from someone who'd survived what most people couldn't. She told her story carefully, acknowledged the past without dwelling in it, focused on lessons learned, skills developed, the difference between using expertise for harm versus using it for protection. When she finished, the applause was sustained, genuine. During the Q&A, someone asked the inevitable question, do you regret cooperating against your husband? Serena thought about Damien, dead now, unable to hurt anyone else. Thought about the 12 years she'd given him, the empire she'd built for him, the moment she'd decided to tear it all down. I regret that cooperation was necessary. I regret that I enabled crimes that hurt people. But do I regret protecting myself? No. Never. Another question. What would you tell someone in a similar situation? That you're stronger than you think. That leaving is possible even when it seems impossible. And that the skills you develop surviving something terrible can be used to build something good, if you're willing to do the work. After the conference, people approached her, handed her business cards, asked about consulting services, thanked her for sharing her story. One woman, maybe 40, waited until everyone else had left. I just wanted to thank you, she said quietly. My husband controls everything, money, accounts, decisions. I've been too scared to leave because I don't think I can survive alone. But listening to you, maybe I can. Serena handed her a card. Call me. I'll help you understand your financial situation. No charge. Just call. The woman took the card with shaking hands and left. Serena stood alone in the empty conference room and felt that same pride she'd felt opening the New York office. She was using what she'd learned, all of it, good and bad, to help people instead of hurt them. That was redemption. Not erasing the past, but transforming it into something useful. December ended with snow and silence. Serena spent New Year's Eve in her apartment, alone by choice, reviewing the year that had passed. Damien dead. Business thriving. Reputation rebuilt. Life completely, finally, hers. At midnight, she poured champagne and made a toast to no one. To survival. To rebuilding. To proving that the power was never in the throne, it was in the woman who held it up. She drank alone and felt something she'd been afraid to name for 2 years. Peace. Not happiness, not joy, just peace. The calm that came from knowing she'd survived the worst and built something good from the wreckage. In January, the foundation asked her to speak at their annual fundraiser. 700 people, major donors, opportunity to share her story and encourage support. She said yes. The speech was different than the business conference, more personal, more vulnerable. She talked about what it felt like to be trapped by someone else's control, about building the courage to leave, about the fear that came with starting over. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I'm someone who made choices, some good, some terrible. I enabled crimes. I profited from illegal activity. I spent 12 years being complicit because it was easier than fighting back." So when I tell you that change is possible, that rebuilding is possible, I'm not speaking from some moral high ground. I'm speaking from the wreckage of a life I helped destroy and somehow managed to rebuild into something better. The applause was different this time. Not admiration for success, but recognition of struggle. These were people who understood complicated escapes, imperfect victories, survival that came with costs. After the event, donations exceeded projections by 40%. Catherine hugged her backstage. "Thank you. That was exactly what people needed to hear. I just told the truth." That's what made it powerful. Serena drove home through January cold, thought about truth and power and all the ways they intersected. She'd spent 12 years lying about what she was building, hiding crimes behind legitimate facades. Now she spent her days telling the truth about complicated situations and getting paid to solve them legally. Same skills, different context, all the difference. Spring came early that year. By March, trees were budding and the city felt alive again. Serena had 17 major clients now, a team of 8 associates, and a waiting list of families who wanted her expertise. She'd been invited to write a book about her experience. Declined. Her story belonged to her, not to publishers who'd turn it into sensational narrative. But she'd agreed to teach a seminar at Harvard Business School. One session focused on crisis management and rebuilding after scandal. The students would be uncomfortable, would ask hard questions, would want to know if redemption was real or just good marketing. She'd tell them the truth. It was both. And neither. And everything in between. On the 3-year anniversary of the gala, Serena woke up in her Cambridge apartment and realized she'd forgotten to mark the date. It had passed without significance. Just another day in a life that no longer measured time by catastrophes. She went to work, met with clients, reviewed contracts, made decisions. Normal work, legal work, good work. That evening, she had dinner with Lauren and the other partners. They toasted the firm's success, discussed expansion plans, talked about the future like it was something they controlled rather than something that controlled them. Walking home after dinner, Serena passed the building where she'd first met Victor Chen to discuss immunity. 3 years ago, she had been terrified, uncertain, desperately trying to survive. Now she was thriving. Not because the past had disappeared, because she'd refused to let it define her completely. She'd been the invisible wife who built an empire, then the cooperating witness who destroyed it, then the woman who rebuilt herself into something legitimate and powerful and entirely her own. The woman people had tried to replace. The woman who'd proven she was never standing beside the throne. She was the power that held it up all along. And when they'd tried to take that throne away, she'd let them have it. Then she'd built a better one,